going to tell you about the language learning method, Language Cafe, that we use a lot at Learning for Integration at our organization. So if we look at the first slide, the purpose of the Language Cafe method is to practice a second language or any foreign language, really, in an informal way, especially focusing on spoken language and improving conversation and communication skills. And the Language Cafe is easy to establish, only you need some preparation work to find a suitable venue and so on, and tutors and materials, and we will discuss this more later on. The target group can vary from big to small. In a big venue or a big language cafe, there can be several different groups or tables for different languages, or even different levels of learners, like beginners and intermediate, and so on. Or the same language can be divided into several groups or tables. So to ensure effective communication, so that the groups aren't too big, and they should be about 4 to 6 persons in size. And very often they might be a bit bigger, but this makes it a little bit more difficult. And next, the detailed description of the method. The objectives of the method is an informal way to practice speaking and spoken communication in a second language. It's also a very good way of creating community spirit and social relations within a group. For example, students on a course can get to know each other better and feel more comfortable with each other, or migrants can practice their native language in the new home country and associate with locals, and the migrants themselves can teach the locals their own language. So it's a good way of creating social contacts and integrating migrant learners in the home country by meeting locals and learning about culture. And you can, of course, apply this to any other groups or classrooms or any kind of group, really. And the skills gained by this method are improving spoken and communication skills in a second language, and learning to create social connections in a second language. And the learners can also learn about other cultures when they speak with learners from different cultural backgrounds. So this is one of the main ideas of this method. And then the step-by-step description of the procedure. So as we discussed already, the Language Cafe can be organized at different times, like once a week or several times a week, either in a classroom or in a more informal venue, such as cafe, restaurant, library, and so on. The organizer should have signs for each language that is spoken in the cafe, and they can be placed in different tables. It helps to be organized, even though the participants should be able to choose freely which languages they would like to speak or teach, depending how many languages there are available. And if possible, there should be a tutor at each table who is a native speaker of the language spoken at that table, and they facilitate the conversation by offering topics or providing material, such as picture cards for beginners, or discussion or debate cards on different themes or topics for more advanced learners. We'll describe them more later. And also different games can be played that require the use of vocabulary, such as explanation game or memory game. So the expected outcomes and conclusions are strengthening the learner's skills in speaking and communicating in a second language, as well as creating social connections between a group of learners. And the learners will become more confident in using the spoken language in their second language. And in a group with learners from mixed cultural backgrounds, the learners can also learn about other cultures and share information about their own culture. And possible risks that may happen and experience to avoid them. So the method is based on social interaction, and so there might be issues such as conflict among the group, which can be solved with having at least 1 or 2 tutors who facilitate the discussion and supervise the situation, or a teacher in a classroom situation. And it helps to provide material, such as discussion topics that are suitable for each target group. So nothing that is too difficult or too sensitive as a topic to discuss, for example. And then I'm going to present an example about a language cafe called Cafe Lingua in Helsinki. So Cafe Lingua in Helsinki is an international multilingual event where people come to practice speaking in different languages. And we speak different languages in different tables. Both native and non-native speakers are present, and you can change tables when you want. There's free discussion, meeting people, playing board games. And this event takes place every week, and there are approximately 60 to 80 people every week, and more than 10 languages very often at the same time. And the language cafe, Cafe Lingua, was established in 2005 at the University of Helsinki through a student union committee called Erasmus Student Network. And at present, Cafe Lingua is organized in cooperation between Learning for Integration, RY, and Jolly Dragon, which is an organization for foreigners in Finland. And many other organizations and their members attend the event, and it's very well known in the capital area in Finland. And the event has received funding from Finnish Cultural Foundation for a Finnish tutor, Finnish material and coordination, as well as from the Swedish Culture Foundation for a Swedish tutor and material. The Cafe Lingua events are advertised in their Facebook group, which is at the following address that you can see here. And here next are some pictures from Cafe Lingua Helsinki from the past few years, with different groups of people at different tables, and you can see some materials, some flashcards being used here. And some of these are from different venues, as we had to change the venue a few times. And different size groups. And then we come to establishing a language cafe. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to establish your own language cafe and some tips and so on. So choosing the time and venue is important. It should be cozy, informal, preferably free, or you can negotiate a deal with a cafe or bar or other venue. You can look for cultural venues, cultural centers, libraries, and smaller cafes or bar that are less popular and usually need some customers, especially in the middle of the week. So if you have trouble finding a suitable venue, you can choose, it's a good idea to choose a weekday for the cafe, as it's less busy than usual, but only if you have a venue ready. So based on experience, people are more inclined to go after work on a weekday, so it's quite popular to just pop over after work or studying. And if possible, you shouldn't change the venue or the date too often, because consistency is important for the information to spread if you're trying to create like a public language cafe or a language cafe that attracts certain groups, for example. Of course, if you're doing it with your class, then this doesn't matter. So next, promotion and communication. So if you're creating a language cafe for different audiences that you want to reach, a Facebook group is a good option for promotion, because it's more interactive, and it can also serve as a forum for people to ask questions and post different issues and search for language exchange partners, for example. And a Facebook page is a more simple, and it's good for disseminating information about the events, the time and place and so on. It might be useful to have both, depending on what kind of event you're creating. And flyers are always a useful way to disseminate information, you can send them to different organizations or leave at different venues or education institutions and send via email. It's important to have a network, hopefully a growing network that keeps the event going and spreading the information through your networks. And you can also cooperate with different organizations to have more participants and to spread the word further. And as I said, social media is important. Joining Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Vimeo, YouTube. You can even create a blog. And communication and consistency are important. You should create a Facebook event every time, or whatever other media you're using. It's important to create an event every time so that people know when and where to come. And yeah, just send an email to your contacts or mailing lists every time. And yeah. And then about language tutors. It's a good idea to have tutors of specific languages in different tables, depending on which languages you're trying to teach, of course. The tutors don't need to be teachers with a teaching background, and they don't have to have qualifications necessarily, as long as they know the language in question very well, preferably native or very fluent in the language, and they should be organized and sociable so that they can help the participants. So you can find people who might want to volunteer as tutors, such as students, teacher trainees, retired people, foreigners who wish to learn the domestic language in exchange of learning, of teaching their own language. And you can send emails to student organizations and post on the mailing lists, Facebook groups of different education institutions to find tutors. You can also have several volunteers for different languages or even at different times. And if you get funding, having tutors for the main languages is one of the most important things to have, because it is very, very helpful. And then we go to activities and materials. So it is good to use a variety of materials to avoid repetition and to have different kinds of activities for everyone participating. And the preparation time for materials is 1 to 2 hours for a few meetings, usually. So you need pen, paper, flashcards, games, worksheets, books, texts. These are different kinds of materials that can be used to facilitate discussion and provide topics and themes for the language table. And these kind of materials can include, for example, flashcards with pictures or words for basic vocabulary for beginners of a certain language, and discussion and debate cards with different topics that can be discussed for more advanced students or learners. And games such as word explanation game. Each person can explain a word and the others have to guess the word. This is a very basic game. You can have other games as well, such as name game. So each person gets a name of a famous person and they have to describe the person, and the other people guess in that language that they're learning. And then you can have memory games and many other games. You can also use worksheets for categorizing crosswords, reading comprehension, all kinds of worksheets, which is a little bit more like classroom teaching, but still it can be used to some extent, of course. So you can create many kinds of materials, for example, at the following address, using the language menu link, where you can find tools for creating all kinds of worksheets and flashcards and so on. There are also many other tools online for creating materials, such as Word Cloud, Mind Map, Quiz Revolution, Quizworks, and so on. Life binders also have a lot of resources for teachers, and here's one with teachers' resources. And we have a few projects that we've been involved with that created material and established language cafes. And this material can be found, for example, at the NBCL NordPlus project website at this address. And you can also find material on the Language Voices Erasmus Plus project website at the following address. So as you can see, the Language Cafe is a very flexible method that you can use with different target groups, different levels, and you can use different materials and have tutors and different sizes, group sizes as well, and so on. So we hope this was a helpful presentation, an introduction to language cafes. Thank you.